the Antichrist. Someone with all the powers of Jesus, but evil. It sounds like a character in a low-budget horror movie, kind of like evil Superman. But who is the Antichrist really? Is this really a biblical concept? And if so, what will he do? When will he come? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So tradition describes the Antichrist as the opposite of Christ, an enemy of God. And it's said that he will rise up and come to power at some point during the end times. He will reign terribly in a period just prior to the Last Judgment. And this idea came about because of a mixture of a couple of things. So first, the term Antichrist is found in the writings of John. For example, we have 1 John 2:18, which reads, "Dear children, this is the last hour, and as you have heard, the Antichrist is coming. Even now, many Antichrists have come. This is how we know it is the last hour." So John describes the Antichrist as a liar, as somebody who's denied Christ. There's also a prophecy in the book of Daniel, which points to a specific person who will rise up and rule, a foretelling of the coming of a final persecutor. Daniel 7:25 reads, "He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time." So this verse in Daniel is traditionally paired with the verses in John and then perpetuated by stories and writings around the medieval period. And so all that kind of mixes together to create what many people today kind of picture as the Antichrist. This idea of an Antichrist coming right before the end times, like the final boss of a video game, isn't necessarily what the Bible's implying. Take that verse in Daniel, for example. Most scholars agree that it's not actually talking about the end of the world, and was in fact talking about a ruler who tried to destroy the Jewish people about 150 years before the birth of Christ. In the verses written by John that use the word Antichrist, only one kind of points to a singular Antichrist. The others are more general, like 1 John 2:22, which reads, "And who is a liar? Anyone who says that Jesus is not the Christ. Anyone who denies the Father and the Son is an Antichrist." So apocalyptic literature, writings about the end of the world, can be tricky to understand. They're tricky because they are largely steeped in symbolism. And on top of that, the symbol's meaning is often something that would have been familiar to Christians back then, but aren't really things that we would recognize today. So if we only take verses on their face value, without understanding the background, we can end up with wildly inaccurate conclusions. For example, let's take a look at 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 and 4. "Don't be fooled by what they say, for the day will not come until there is a great rebellion against God, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the one who brings destruction. He will exalt himself and defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. He will even sit at the temple of God, claiming that he himself is God." So this is a verse that talks about the man of lawlessness who is coming. And many people read that and think, well, sounds like the Antichrist to me. Paul's clearly explaining what will happen at the end of the world thousands of years from now. Sprinkle in some fireballs from the sky and we've got ourselves an apocalypse. But if we dig a little bit deeper and start to understand the background, this verse takes on a slightly different meaning. In the earlier paragraph, Paul says, "Now, dear brothers and sisters, let us clarify some things about the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ." See, Paul wrote the first letter to the Thessalonians, and in it he was addressing some problems there. And then he received a report saying that the problems he was trying to address in the first letter were not only still there, but have gotten worse. There's a couple things going on. First, Christians were being persecuted. They also misunderstood what Paul said about the second coming of Jesus. They were freaking out. There were false teachers saying things like, "The end of the world is near, we're all doomed." And many of the Christians then believed that the persecution they were experiencing was a sign of the end times. They thought maybe the world was about to end, and that they had been left behind, that God forgot about them, and they were scared. And so Paul tries to correct this, because the coming of Jesus should never be something that we're scared of. It shouldn't inspire fear in Christians. And so he writes to comfort them. And in order to teach them, he alludes to verses in Daniel and in Isaiah, knowing that the kingdoms of this earth have and will continue to produce rulers who rebel against God. Paul knew about the verses in Daniel and the rulers in the past, and Paul saw with his own eyes the Roman Empire. You got people like Caligula or Nero, and he expected the same sort of thing to continue happening. He saw every generation having their own evil rulers to deal with, their own trials and hardships. And so his goal is to give hope, to say to people that evil exists and evil will come and Jesus will prevail in the end. He also wanted to make it clear that the events leading up to Jesus' second coming were going to be very public and very obvious. So nobody needs to be scared about being left behind or not knowing if Jesus came back and they missed it. So what Paul is really doing with this verse is trying to alleviate the fears of a specific group of people. And he's not writing a cryptic verse intended to freak out future generations. Paul's writings were never meant to be nightmare fuel for stories about the last days. He was trying to encourage Jesus' followers in the present day and let them know that Jesus wins in the end. So in summary, is the Antichrist a thing? Yes. In fact, there are many Antichrists. There have been and will continue to be rulers who rebel against God, and this will keep happening until the day that God brings his final judgment. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel. Also, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll leave the verses in the description that were used today. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology, and remember, you get what you pay for.